Funding.
All right. Good evening, everybody. And I'm really, really delighted to welcome Marissa Daniels to give her presentation on Young AFMW from her experience. My name's Brenda Masters. I'm hosting the session tonight. I'd like to start the evening by acknowledging the First Nations people on whose land we meet. We're all scattered across the eastern seaboard, at least those who are currently online. We could have anyone come on board. We all come from different areas which have different First Nations people. I come from Canberra, and I'd like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, their nations, their elders past, present and emerging, and I'd like to extend that acknowledgement to the lands on which we all meet. In fact, I'm going to invite Rosalie, Marissa and Sarah, who are currently with us, to acknowledge the people that whose lands they occupy at present. I also welcome any First Nations people who might be present with us or who are watching at a later date. Rosalie, would you like to say a few words of acknowledgement?
Yes, I'm in Melbourne, in the Kulin Nation, and I'm in Bunnyurong area, down near Frankston.
Right. And Sarah?
I'm on the Irukandji land.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to hand over to Marissa and allow her to acknowledge whoever she needs to acknowledge and proceed with the talk. Thank you very much, Marissa.
Thank you so much for the invitation to be here this evening. I am in Mianjin on the land of the Turrbal people, and I'd like to acknowledge their connection to country and that these lands have long been places of teaching and learning. And I'd also like to acknowledge any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who may be watching this video with us this evening or in the future. It's such a privilege to be here at a session dedicated to Young AFMW. I was recently invited to speak at the MWIA Western Pacific Regional Conference in the Philippines on the topic of Young AFMW and MWIA and how we can prepare the next generation of women leaders in medicine. And so tonight I'm going to share that presentation with you. And if there's time, I hope we can have some discussion afterwards. Or perhaps some discussion online with the video that's shared after this evening. I've also got some highlights of the meeting to share with anyone afterwards if there's time as well. Did that progress fine? Can everybody see that next slide?
Yes, it did. It's working brilliantly. Thank you very much.
Awesome. So I thought I'd start with who am I and how am I qualified to be talking about this? Well, I'm a paediatric intensive care trainee based in Queensland, and I'm also a research student with the University of Queensland, and I've been involved in medical women's societies at a state, national and international level now for more than 15 years. In 2019, AFMW formalised our group for young medical women as the Young AFMW Committee. And I was lucky enough to be part of the inaugural leadership group. In time, we started the process of establishing a similar group for the Western Pacific region of MWIA, but that was during the height of the COVID pandemic, and understandably our priorities have evolved. Nevertheless, it was such a privilege to be involved in MWIA at a regional level and to meet Dr. Vivina Chu, who hosted the meeting in the Philippines. So this is the talk I gave in July at the MWIA Western Pacific Regional Conference on how Young MWIA is preparing the next generation of women leaders in medicine. I thought I'd start, well, in the Philippines, I started with a pause to get a sense for who was in the audience. I happen to know, it's delightful to know everybody who's listening today, but I hope there'll be people watching this in the future. And so we've already discussed this, but it's wonderful that such a range of people have chosen to share some of their precious time with a discussion focused on Young AFMW. And I invite us all to reflect on the question, how is Young AFMW relevant to you individually? Are you a member of Young AFMW? Are you interested in joining? Are you interested as a medical educator or as a mentor for somebody? And bear that in mind as we progress through the talk. Some of the most profound experiences of my career have been facilitated by AFMW. And as I prepared to give this talk, I tried to distill down the fundamental things that I've learned through being involved in medical women's societies that I think foster leadership qualities. And the 4 key actions, and I deliberately focused on actions that I came up with, were to listen with curiosity, to find your tribe, to act with courage, and to know that you are enough. And I realize none of this is groundbreaking, but I hope that over the next half hour or so, we can touch on how these fundamentals are a driving force behind the innovation that MWIA members have demonstrated for more than 100 years. Firstly, though, why care about gender equity and healthcare leadership? I'm not an expert on the evidence in this area, though I'm very pleased to say that there is evidence in this space, and many AFMW members and prominent Australian women are experts in this area. And many, probably most in this audience, are far more expert than me. But in brief, we know that advancing women into healthcare leadership is an issue of equity and social justice. Increasing gender equity in medical leadership is likely to improve health system performance, as well as the health of the community and the health of the workforce. We know that gender equity in medical leadership is currently lacking. Globally, 70% of healthcare is delivered by women, but only 25% of medical leaders are women. In Australia, there's a growing body of evidence supporting systems change to advance gender equity in medical leadership. And there's excellent work being done in this area, led by Professor Helena Teed on a project called Advancing Women in Healthcare Leadership. I'll touch on some of the principles today. Professor Teed's work has outlined some important strategies, and these include to foster personal qualities essential for leaders, to upskill women with specific leadership skills, to provide formal and informal opportunities for mentorship, to address systemic barriers to the advancement of women in medical leadership, and to build practices that foster credibility, collaboration, and continuous improvement in the systems we work in. But one of the most interesting things to me is that Young AFMW addressed many of these intuitively, before or without knowledge of the supporting evidence. It's this sort of insightful innovation that has kept MWIA relevant for 100 years, and this is the innovation we need to continue to foster. I think MWIA and AFMW offer opportunities to acquire the following attributes essential for transformative leadership. And so I'll reiterate them. We all need to listen with curiosity to ourselves, to our patients and our communities, to our colleagues, our supervisors, and to society at large. We need to find our tribe, that is to say, a core group of supporters who feed our energy reserves. We then need to act with courage to do what we know needs to be done. And we all need to know that we are enough, just as we are. Perfection isn't necessary, and nor is it helpful. I'd like to share something about how the Young AFMW committee started out and use it as an example of how these qualities manifested for us. Our Young AFMW committee was first established in November 2019, way back just before the pandemic started. We were excited to get going, inspired by the events of the MWIA centenary celebrations in New York, which many of my Young AFMW colleagues and I had been delighted to attend together. We returned home and enthusiastically and diligently wrote our committee terms of reference, which Council quickly accepted. One of our aims was to create flexible ways for Young AFMW members to contribute to the committee. This was important to us because a position on AFMW Council required a commitment to attend a specific number of meetings, and many AFMW members many young AFMW members or potential members have insufficient control over our rosters to be able to commit to this. So we were systematically excluding a large group of people. So we were keen to develop a formal way for these women to experience the benefits of holding a position of leadership within AFMW. Another of our aims was to create a framework to support motivated young women to design and implement their own project with the support of the Young AFMW Committee and from AFMW Council. One such project was on the topic of emotional intelligence education. This idea had grown out of repeated experiences in the workplace of being subjected to bullying or harassment or aggressive behaviour from colleagues, superiors and patients, and a desire to better understand how emotions manifested in the workplace so we could maintain professionalism while still responding appropriately. There are now many programs and initiatives available exploring emotions in the workplace, but at the time there weren't, or at least they weren't known to us. And it demonstrated significant insight on the part of our enlightened young AFMW member to have prioritised this as she did and to have posed it as a project for us. A third aim was to work towards equitable representation of minority groups on the committee, and to this end, we created positions on the committee for an Indigenous Australian representative and an international representative. Of course, we hadn't anticipated the COVID-19 pandemic 2020 would bring. This impacted young doctors significantly. It impacted everyone, and it impacted young doctors. There were last-minute changes to rostered work hours, increased work and on-call requirements, and for many, access to leave was revoked. Work demands changed without consultation, and often with increased responsibility and reduced access to supervision. As a result, the priorities of young AFMW evolved. Our regular online video chat catch-ups changed from formal committee meetings with a structure of receiving working group and committee updates to a much more flexible format, where attendees discuss topics of relevance to our well-being at the time. This often included informal debriefing about traumatic events at work, whether they be clinical situations or interpersonal challenges, or structural issues such as access to clinical supervision or to leave. And that was all important, but it was easy to feel like we'd failed to deliver on our commitment to undertake specific projects. To reframe the situation, though, we'd also adjusted creatively to meet the current needs of the group. We created an environment in which young AFMW members could connect in a kind and respectful space. We were able to listen to each other with curiosity and with kindness. We created a tribe. In fact, the group of women who formed part of Young AFMW during the pandemic remain among some of my closest and most trusted friends. The group fostered leadership skills in many of our members, and it's delightful to witness the careers of these dedicated medical women grow and evolve. So, in this example, listening with curiosity allowed us to see the humanity in those around us, as well as in ourselves. It enabled us to identify issues of importance to us and to explore ways to take action to create positive change. The kindness and respect we showed each other are indeed leadership qualities, and they built up our community and created our tribe. MWIA and AFMW have encouraged me to learn to listen with curiosity in other ways as well. Many of these opportunities have been by interacting with medical women from all around the world, from different cultures and from a variety of craft groups at meetings like the Western Pacific Conference, and as a contributor to working groups. The capacity to listen with curiosity also helps foster other personal qualities essential for leaders, including the ability to prioritise our personal safety and well-being. There are real unintended and negative consequences of caring, both for informal carers and for professional ones. As women carry the burden of informal caring in the community, medical women are at increased risk of these unintended negative consequences by being both formal and informal carers. Some of these negative consequences I'd like to mention tonight are burnout, moral distress, and secondary traumatic stress. These consequences of caring are predictable, and they impact not just on us, but our families and our communities. They sneak up on us, and those affected may not be aware of what's going on. Therefore, it's essential that we educate ourselves and our communities on the factors that impact professional quality of life and well-being. We can try to recognise these early signs in ourselves and each other, minimise the drivers of these negative consequences, and reinforce factors that are protective. I'll first spend a little bit of time talking about burnout. It's quite topical, and there's a real risk that familiarity breeds contempt. Burnout has been defined by the WHO as a state of chronic occupational distress characterised by emotional exhaustion, feelings of depersonalisation, and career dissatisfaction. Symptoms of burnout, though, peak in early training and in early career physicians. In fact, some data suggests as many as 50% of early career physicians are affected. It has been stated that burnout manifests in individuals, but is fundamentally rooted in systems. And this is because the drivers of burnout include factors often beyond the control of any one individual. These driving factors include workload and job demands, control and flexibility over work, organisational culture and values, work-life integration, social support and community at work, efficiency and resources, and finding meaning at work. There are a number of protective factors, though, and they include being empowered to communicate professional needs, feeling valued by your colleagues, and being part of a department that's committed to well-being, demonstrably committed to well-being. Similar to burnout, but different in its root causes, is moral distress. This is the psychological, biological, spiritual, behavioural, and social impact of perpetrating, failing to prevent, or bearing witness to acts that transgress deeply held moral beliefs and expectations. It manifests as feelings of shame or guilt, or feeling betrayed. And one of the main sources of moral injury is the hidden curriculum in medicine. The hidden curriculum are the unintended messages conveyed by faculty, staff, and senior residents in teaching hospitals, and the resulting unprofessional culture that is conveyed to learners. We're going to come back to the hidden curriculum in a bit. Thirdly, and particularly relevant to young AFMW, is secondary traumatic stress. This may occur when there's a stressful situation in the presence of powerlessness. It results from indirect exposure to trauma through first-hand accounts of a traumatic event, and in the older literature can be called compassion fatigue or vicarious trauma. Risk factors for this include social or professional isolation, feeling professionally compromised because of inadequate training, having fewer years working in the field, being younger, being female, or having a personal history of exposure to trauma. So we need to see the systems we function in clearly, as well as how they impact our personal and professional well-being by modifying the risk of burnout, moral distress, and secondary traumatic stress. And we need to know that not only is it okay to prioritise our own well-being and safety, it's necessary if we're to continue our important work. Young medical women are at increased risk of adverse consequences because of a number of factors, including younger age, less experience, reduced control over working conditions, and less work flexibility. So there is value in young medical women having an avenue, such as Young AFMW, to address these issues that pertain specifically to them. Finally, we must be open to noticing the system barriers to culture change in medicine. This is difficult, but absolutely key. One such barrier is the hidden curriculum, and it disproportionately disadvantages those from less privileged backgrounds. Those from well-resourced families are generally prepared for the hidden curriculum during their schooling years and are familiar with the dominant cultural norms. Those from underrepresented populations, those first in their family to go to university, those from immigrant backgrounds or from low socioeconomic areas lack this familiarity. So I ask you to take a moment to reflect on the hidden curriculum in one place you work. It might even be AFMW. I'm not going to ask anyone to share because I think it's so important that we can be completely honest with ourselves as we reflect on this. Can you recall a time when you held back from raising an issue you felt strongly about? Why did you do that? What made you hesitant to speak up? And how can we change this? The hidden curriculum is so important, I'm going to come back to it a third time in a few slides with some suggestions. So in summary, by encouraging us to listen with curiosity, AFMW can help us come to a greater understanding of the personal and system factors that impact on well-being, and therefore on our capacity to function at our best. This brings us to my second point, which is a quicker point. Find your tribe. Our work is physically and psychologically demanding. We all need a safe space to retreat and heal our soul. I've already described the importance of finding my Young AFMW tribe during the pandemic. And as I've mentioned, there is evidence that social support, feeling valued in a professional space, and feeling empowered to communicate professional needs are all protective against burnout, one of the big system barriers to successful participation in medical leadership. As well as this, though, links between Young AFMW and AFMW Council foster formal and informal mentoring opportunities. It's important, though, to acknowledge that not everyone is going to be on your tribe. It's wise to enter into relationships with colleagues, supervisors, and employers aware of this. We need to learn to respect and function alongside people from outside our tribe. And this can be done through participation in AFMW and MWIA committees and working groups, and participation in respectful and constructive discussion about resolutions at formal meetings. And now to the third point, to act with courage. Once we've listened curiously and have the support of our tribe, we must take action if we're to be effective agents of change. One of the most important ways AFMW can support young medical women in their leadership journey is to be a safe place to learn to act with courage. To take action towards system change requires courage. Of course, we need physical safety. We need our physical needs for food, water, shelter, and rest to be met. But what are the barriers and enablers of systems change? MWIA has existed for more than 100 years for the purpose of supporting gender equity in medicine. Why aren't we there yet? I'd like to reflect on some of the barriers to change today and how AFMW can help foster qualities in our young medical women that help us get closer to the future we seek. There is a term that describes an environment in which individuals are supported and feel safe to take the interpersonal risks required to create change. It's called psychological safety. These are places where we treat each other with kindness and respect and with compassion in a way that acknowledges our shared, fallible humanity. Psychologically safe workplaces have real, tangible benefits for our patients too. Quality of care improves, patient self-care improves, and psychologically safe healthcare facilities even have physiological benefits and have been shown to reduce pain. Psychological safety is founded on three things: having shared knowledge, using that shared knowledge to achieve shared goals, and moving towards these goals with mutual respect. These are things we can learn together in Young AFMW when we come together in meetings and to do our work as committees. I invite you now to reflect on one AFMW or MWIA or state Medical Women's Society working group or committee that you're part of. If you're not part of one, think of another group. Can you recall a point of conflict that has needed to be addressed? I should point out that psychologically safe workplaces are not free from disagreement or from heated discussion, far from it. Rather, they're places where this discussion can be encouraged to take place in a way that ensures mutual respect for all involved. Have you thought of a point of conflict? What do you think caused it? How was it resolved? And I'm guessing the majority of the time, ensuring adequately shared knowledge, shared goals, and ensuring mutual respect rectified the issue. Now I'd like to come back to the hidden curriculum. Not infrequently, this is something that undermines attempts to create psychologically safe workplaces. Can I ask you, how do we learn how to learn? How much do we learn from reading as opposed to by watching or by doing? I mean, we learn how to teach ourselves from textbooks, and we learn about closed-loop communication in teams. But what is the hidden curriculum conveyed to junior doctors by how faculty, staff, and senior residents and registrars behave in the workplace? How often are we curt or abrupt with an inquisitive student when asked a question during a busy ward round so that we can get to clinic on time? How often are we rude on the phone, though we might recognise it and regret it after the fact? And what impact does this have on the team, especially for those learning by observation? More importantly, though, how can we do better? We're all stretched and becoming more so. Surely it's understandable to be curt or a little bit rude when we're overworked, tired, or hungry. It's really hard. There's a few things we can do, though, and these can be incorporated into daily practice with just a little bit of extra effort. And I have 2 suggestions tonight of things that we can do and that we can practice in AFMW as individuals. Firstly, have a failure friend. This is a trusted colleague who can observe for a short period of time and offer constructive advice on areas for improvement. Perhaps they can watch 5 minutes of a ward round or listen into a couple of phone calls and comment on your tone and content. Secondly, we can have some phrases prepared for when we slip up. If we're unintentionally rude, we could just say something like, "I'm sorry, I'm having a bad day. That didn't come out as I expected. I didn't mean to be rude. Can I try it again?" So, in summary, AFMW is ideally positioned to help us learn to take positive action for systems change, both to combat barriers to women's success as medical leaders, but also to build practices that foster continuous improvement in our systems. And finally, know that you are enough, just as you are. Perfection isn't something to aim for. We need to try, make mistakes, learn, and try again in a safe place. Revising the plan is not failure. Rather, it demonstrates resilience and adaptability in the face of conflicting and complicated obligations. Our diverse and beautiful communities deserve nothing less than beautifully flawed, compassionate, and dedicated you. So please invest in yourself and in each other for the sake of yourself, our colleagues, our future colleagues, and our patients. I hope we can all make this, our humanity, the centre of healthcare. This is a photo from of Ross River up in far north Queensland, where I was working for the last couple of years. It's just beautiful. So in closing, I'd like to acknowledge that we, medical women, have a very privileged position. The women I've met in AFMW and MWIA are an amazing and inspiring group. There is now, as ever, a need to support medical women to succeed as leaders. The evidence tells us it's not enough to focus on upskilling women so they have personal qualities and leadership skills. Systems change is essential, and I hope I've illustrated that Young AFMW is uniquely placed to foster in young women doctors key behaviours, skills, and attributes to succeed as transformational medical leaders now and in the future, by guiding us to listen with curiosity, find our tribe, act with courage, and know that we're enough. Have some references. And that's a photo of the group of young medical women in the Philippines who we got together at the end of one of the days of the conference and had a lovely chat for about an hour and a half. And I think that's all for the presentation.
Thank you so much, Marissa. Sorry, it was a bit of a monologue, but you had it all prepared, and I certainly was very happy to sit back and let you go through it. Really, really beautiful ideas. I've got a few questions myself, but I guess I'd like to open it to Sarah and Rosalie first, if they have any questions, and then we can continue with the discussion. So, Rosalie, is there anything in particular you would like to ask Marissa about? I think
Oh, you're on mute.
Still on mute, Rosalie.
As I said, I've been out of medical practice for a very long time, but I actually have been representing medical women's on the National Council of Women in Victoria. That's another organisation that is interesting to listen to and has a variety of inputs. But I think what you're saying, Marissa, is really important. I think it's something that small groups need to get together and discuss amongst themselves so that it can be something where they are supporting each other. And I think mutual support from both your contemporaries and from older practitioners is terribly important. And I just hope that AFMW can get through some of its current difficulties by applying a more sympathetic approach to other people's ideas about how it should be operating. Don't know if that covers it for you.
Did you have
There were actually, sorry.
Your comment?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it was the conference in Cebu was a wonderful opportunity to I mean, they always are, the international conferences, but to hear around the world ideas on how to foster respectful communication. And I have to say there were a number of other sessions that I've got in the summary that I've got later. I've just pulled together some pointers from other presentations, but you know, the idea of how to address barriers to change, and the idea that doing more of what we've always done doesn't work. So, and why is that? And then the next step is, what can we do about it? But one of the points that was made was, you know, the importance of understanding that a natural consequence of trying to create change is that there's resistance to that change, and that's predictable, and it is wise to build strategies to manage that into any plan to create change. I don't know if that is too cryptic, but I found that really rang true for me, understanding how power comes into the equation.
Yeah, I agree. And I think as one grows older and experiences a variety of different situations, the principles of what you've said apply to a lot of groups. I work in environmental groups at the moment, and the conflicts that arise are just devastating. But the people who work within the groups are so committed that they seem to be able to overcome a lot of those difficulties. And I think the way in which you've outlined it is very helpful. I'll be happy to read it, to listen to it again and read more of what you've got to say.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that. That people who hold a passionate position will often end up in conflict because they're not necessarily prepared to listen to the other side. And that's something I've observed a lot. I'm really interested, Marissa, to know how you went about finding that first AFMW tribe. did they just fall into place, or you met them in New York, or it was friends of friends? I mean, how did it come that you had this beautiful, cohesive group of women who just wanted to make it work?
I invited everybody, and people who wanted to come came. I just opened it up and said, if you feel like this is a group that might be useful for you, we'll create a position. There's plenty of work to go round. Please come. And as the pandemic progressed, we ended up just making a regular meeting time. I think it was the first Monday of the month or something, and I would just turn on the Zoom if I was about to do a night shift or making dinner or whatever. I'd just turn it on, and whoever was free at that time would turn up. And it ended up being a really fabulous core group of people. And I think a big part of that was we just made it what we wanted it to be. And I think that's one of my hopes for Young AFMW moving forward, is that, I mean, we created these terms of reference as a starting point. I would hate to think that that they're seen as restrictive. Rather, I hope that, and it's one of the reasons that I thought giving the talk today might be helpful, is just to try and emphasize that the idea is that it's a starting point, and to make it whatever it is that's useful for young people. But I think one of my driving factors in getting the Young AFMW committee going in the first place was that the way AFMW is structured systematically precludes in a lot of ways precludes trainees from participating, because you can't know that your roster is going to allow you to go to meetings. And so you either wing it, and then some of the time you can't come, or you don't put your hand up, which I think is a shame, and it misses the opportunity to address a whole range of important issues.
It's really interesting. Our current Vice President, Madhura Naidu, is a trainee. Katrina, the Secretary, is a trainee in waiting.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Evelyn is a trainee as well, so the Treasurer. So we actually do have
excellent. Yeah, that's great.
The thing is, they put their hand up for AFMW, and they have no spare space for YAFMW.
Which is great. That's great.
But yeah, I guess when you said you just put the call out, I mean, it's just to everybody you knew who was a young female doctor, or just.
I think we tried to advertise it through like AFMW newsletters and things. So, and then the states could then advertise it through their channels. The idea sort of grew from I put my hand up to go to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women in about 2013, and I was the youngest person who went. So I kind of was dubbed the young AFMW person at the meeting, and that grew into, Marissa, where are all the other young AFMW people? And I'm like, I don't know. So it was an attempt to capture all of the people who were eligible to be members of Young AFMW. And we started out, I don't know if you recall, but we had there were some issues with the integration of the online membership. We were transitioning from a paper membership to an online membership. And so that created the capacity to potentially search an electronic database for people who met Young AFMW eligibility criteria. But the integration between the AFMW membership list and the state membership list was a little bit tricky. And so, we try and contact states to let them know to encourage their young people to be part of the group, and then AFMW would advertise. But we just did our best.
Yeah, I really commend you for the way you set it up, because it was like, you knew no fear, there was no boundaries, it didn't matter whether it worked. It's like, give it a red hot go. And
yeah.
And
I mean, even if it fizzles out because now young people have a part on council, that's great. That's great.
But I just think that there's definitely a role for for having a group where young people can hang out together, as you described too. But we've got to find the leadership that allows that to happen. It's really tricky, because I also think most young people don't seem to have your energy. They're putting so much energy into their training and into their life, and they're worrying about whether they're going to find a life partner and get their mortgage and get all the bucket list of what they wanted to achieve by the time they were 40. But putting extra energy into an organisation such as ours seems to be a much lower priority.
It's just tricky.
Very tricky, but there's going to be people like you out there. We've just got to find them. So I think you're an absolute inspiration. I was just so impressed by how quickly you turned that round from the idea. It seems like you had the germ of an idea when you went to New York in, what was it, September, or earlier than that?
The expanded version would be that we'd probably been thinking about it for years, and it was just that there was a group of people who came back from New York and was like, oh, we need to do it now. It's now or never. Little did we know that what December 2019 would bring. It was January, wasn't it?
Yeah, January.
I think it was just a critical mass. We just had accidentally had a group of people together at the right time.
Yeah. Betty Gee has gone on here in the ACT to do big things with the AMA, and she's often on television being interviewed as a GP who's now got a ticket. So she's really doing beautifully in a leadership position, but outside of our organisation. But we don't all have the space for more than one thing. I'm wondering, Sarah's been sitting there quietly, and I'd like to give her the opportunity to ask some questions or make some comments. Or maybe she's not still there. She might have ducked off to ask her husband about that logo. Okay. Sorry, Sarah, sorry, over to you.
Oh, now I've got terrible music playing in my ears. I do not know how to. Hold on. Let me try that. Okay. Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Marissa. Look, I think stepping from Brenda's point and building the momentum, I guess it does sound a little bit like you feel like it was just very organic. Is that fair?
That the group, it was. It was, and I don't. We had a group of interested people, and I guess we set up the committee to give some structure to anybody's involvement, without really worrying about whether or not the match was perfect. So we often had enough people involved to have filled the committee positions, but we didn't have people who really felt able to commit to a committee position. And so they would just come to the meetings and maybe offer a project idea.
So I have strong views about expressions of interest and their ability to harness diversity and inclusiveness. And I often am told that expressions of interest are not the best way to get the right people. And so my conclusion therefore is that I prefer to have an expression of interest and then direct the energies of the people involved. So it sounds to me like you were able to put out an expression of interest and then use the energy that you had from those people. And it sounds like there was a variety of sort of capacities, but you just utilised what you had, which I think, I just wonder if that's what women are quite good at. I don't, or maybe you're just good at it, but, I just wonder if that's one of our strengths, and I just want to see how we can harness that going forward.
Yeah, I think I guess that is kind of what we tried to do. I didn't want to discourage because we had so few people who wanted to be more than an observer. That I didn't want to put off anybody who thought they might like to take on jobs, so to speak. But I also wanted to try and create space for diversity. So we had the positions available and they just stayed vacant if nobody was available, like for the First Nations rep and the international rep. It's
okay to create a position that doesn't get filled.
yeah, I guess partly I tried to accommodate the balance by having the role of project leads. And so if somebody wanted to nominate a project that they wanted to run, that was a way of accommodating that. So they had an official position, but they were doing something that they wanted to do. Yeah.
Does sound like it's a little difficult to control and corral.
Well, I just think she's managing it with projects, which I think probably appeals to the younger generation, is by chunking it into projects. It becomes, like you say, something that they remain passionate about, but then they can tackle it in its entirety, and then it's got a completeness to it.
Yes.
Which I think
yes, exactly.
Positions as, you know, in terms of tenure and I just wonder if that's not a very modern way of looking at it. Maybe we need to look at it in terms of projects rather than roles. That makes sense.
It's a different skill, isn't it? I mean, if you want to. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, and I'm just thinking when we're trying to promote positions and trying to encourage people to do positions, if we're trying to target a younger generation, are we better off targeting it as a project rather than as a role? Because as you're saying, a role requires attendance at specific time frames, whereas a project is so much more not autonomous, but has that flexibility, which I think is what is the change that you've made that's quite radical, really, if that's what you did.
Yeah, I think one of the other, if I'm just thinking back to how did I get involved initially in leadership positions? I took on positions where I could observe first. And I guess that's the benefit of a project position. You could come with an idea that is self-contained and you've got control over, and it gives you an opportunity to watch how treasurer works or secretary works so that you know what you're putting your hand up for, which I think is important for balancing workload for junior doctors. And I mean, there's the reality is that, I mean, if you've not done internship, you don't know I don't know that anybody can anticipate what internship is going to be like. And so that transition is always difficult. And similarly, at each transition, at least at a young AFMW level, there's a bit of attrition when people suddenly realize that they've not got half the time they thought they did, or they've lost some flexibility, or life changes. And I think
Sorry.
No, you're right.
Yeah, I was going to make a comment. I get the distinct impression, Marissa, that you're not afraid of hard work, and you do put your hand up and seem to commit yourself to a lot of stuff, which potentially leads you then overcommitted. I mean, have you found a way to then step back and reassess and manage that? Because overcommitment leads to burnout very, very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually interesting. It's an interesting dynamic being a junior doctor on the AFMW Council. I found it very challenging at times to be one of the most junior members of a team at work, and then to be treasurer of AFMW in my spare time. It is a really interesting distinction to to be the person who does all of everybody's work at work. Often the times it feels like that. And then to be delegating or leading a portfolio in AFMW. I don't think I actually did a very good job of working out how to manage that. I guess the only thing I'd say is that I got to do some wonderful things. Like I'm actually not an IT person, but somehow I've ended up the IT expert on a fair number of AFMW groups. And it is just I mean, it also builds resilience to be given a portfolio that I often ended up doing because it needed to be done. And you just do the best you can. Much like with life, actually.
And keeping on telling yourself, did you always know that you were enough, or is that something you've learnt?
Oh no, I learned that this is all stuff that I've collected from conferences. No, absolutely. I borrowed that from a Don't Forget the Bubbles conference. And it was very powerful when it was presented at the Don't Forget the if you don't know, Don't Forget the Bubbles is like a pediatric online education platform that went on to develop went on to hold some conferences. And at one of their early conferences, someone gave a talk on, I think his whole 45 minutes was "You are enough." And I found it so profound because nobody ever tells us that. Or at least as a trainee, you're never enough.
It's powerful stuff. You're absolutely right. And there's so many more things we could talk about. I got the impression you had a few other items you'd like to share before we close up. So we've probably got 5 more minutes. What have you got for us?
Oh, look, they're slides that I've borrowed. So if we want to stop if we want to stop recording, I can just I'll probably flick through them without them being recorded if people are interested.
Okay, well, shall we?
We don't have to.
I mean, you've prepared it. I'm certainly interested, but obviously it's not something that's appropriate to be recorded for posterity. So, do we have any other questions that we can go? It's now 55 minutes into the session. I think that's quite a big enough chunk for our listeners online. Sorry, the listeners who will be watching afterwards. But if we've got any more questions, comments, Rosalie, is there anything else you would like to say?
I'd like to say thank you to Marissa and also ask her how she's getting on with her career.
Well, let's save that for after we switch off recording. Sarah, is there anything else you'd like to say? And then we can draw this to a close once we're sure that we've covered all the points we needed to cover.
No, I think it was important to me to hear about Marissa's presentation at the Medical Women's International Association. And just reflecting on her comments about being treasurer and delegating, I think that really speaks to the opportunity that these organisations offer, and particularly women, is that opportunity to practice being the leader in a safe environment where there are people who are prepared to back your decisions and scrutinise your decisions in a way where it's not a clinical situation, where it's not always life and death. You do get an opportunity to test yourself a little bit that way. So I thought that's a good point to raise as well, Marissa. Thank you. Great talk.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you again, Marissa. It's really inspiring the way you've put together your journey, your observations, your thoughts, your inspirations. You are absolutely more than enough. I think you're a fabulous young person. Your name still keeps coming up as a go-to person, or someone who organised this or sorted out that, especially the IT. I didn't know you were an IT. You were not an IT natural, because that's the way it's come across over the years. So there you go. You fake it till you make it. Basically, you've done a superb job of helping it get AFMW sort of up from being paper-based, as you say, to an online thing. And I know that there were others involved. It wasn't just you.
Yes,
but
yes, yes.
you clearly had a key role to play there. So thank you so much for your presentation today. Really, really appreciate it. I'm going to stop screen sharing, and I'm inviting those who are still with us online to stay for a little chat afterwards. So goodbye to those of you who are watching later. Thank you for watching.